Welcome to Ask Rabbit Malicious Compliance, where an employee gets back at his boss by getting a doctor's note to use the bathroom. I have some awesome stories for you today, so let's get into it. This first post is titled, Delivering a Little Malicious Compliance to My Entitled Aunt. This happened back in 2003 when I was 19. My aunt, whom you may know from these posts, was trying to do a little social climbing by joining an elite kitty party club. For those of you who don't know, a kitty party is pretty much a gathering of brain-dead trophy wives who come together to brag about how they're spending money that their husbands have made. The kitty refers to the amount collected at the party, every member contributing a certain sum of money each month. The kitty is handed over to one member of the group each month. Anyway, the club my aunt had joined had some high society ladies, including my uncle's boss's wife as its members. This club had a rule to always have home-cooked food at their gatherings. Said home-cooked food would, of course, be provided by the one hosting the gathering. Now, as the other women were wealthy enough to be able to afford servants, this wasn't a problem for them. But when my aunt was to host the gathering, as a new member, she was panic-stricken. You see, my aunt couldn't cook to save her life. She's the kind of cook who lends flavor to her food by smothering everything in butter or drowning her desserts in sugar. Needless to say, she couldn't serve such abominations to her new overlords. I don't like to toot my own horn. Screw it, I most certainly do. But I'm a very good cook. Even at age 19, my culinary skills were admirable. It's one of my hobbies and I love it. Aunt knew this, of course, and decided to implore, emotionally blackmail, try to goad me into preparing the food for her. Food that she would pass on as products of her cooking. This piece of crap had never praised my cooking before. In fact, she would go out of her way to find faults where none existed. When I brought this up, she said she was just trying to push me to do better. When I refused, she decided to go to my father. She went on and on about how it was my summer break, and as I didn't have college classes to attend, I could probably find the time to do it. My dad told her it was a huge task and I shouldn't be compelled to do it, and told Aunt that she shouldn't try to deceive her new friends like this. When she suggested that my stepmom do it, Dad shot that down too. But that piece of crap just wouldn't quit. The party was 4 days away, and for 3 of those days, she would call my dad several times a day to beg him to convince either me or my stepmom to cook for the party. I was pissed and decided to teach her a lesson by doing exactly what she wanted. I told her I would cook for the party, but only if she paid for the ingredients that would be used. I would shop for them myself. Aunt was ecstatic and agreed to my terms. The items, as per my aunt's specifications, included many Indian ingredients. I would strongly suggest that you Google these items to know exactly what they are in order to gain a better understanding of what happened later. My aunt knew for a fact that I was pretty good at preparing all of these dishes and was confident that she would get tons of compliments. She said that she would make the rotis herself. It was the one thing she could cook well. My stepmom offered to help, but I declined. I would be doing this for my beloved auntie all by my little self. The party was to start at noon, but as lunch was going to take a bit longer than expected, I told her I would bring it over to her place myself. She was annoyed, but agreed. I packed and loaded everything into my dad's car and drove it over to her place. I got there at the nick of time. As soon as I was done emptying the food into various pots and pans and Aunt had set the table, the trophy wives have started pouring in. This meant that my aunt would not have the chance to taste the food. My aunt rushed me out the door lest the aristocrats catch a glimpse of the peasant. That very day, in late afternoon, my aunt came over once again. Her eyes were swollen, indicating that she had been crying. She demanded to speak to me, even as my dad and stepmom tried to calm her down and asked her what was wrong. I was in my room. Her screams told me that my mission had been a success. When I stepped into the living room, Aunt went into details about how disgusting the food was. The food was smelly because I had allowed the cottage cheese to rot, and the gravy was so spicy it could burn your mouth. The potatoes used were rotten. I couldn't help to think of the smile on the vegetable vendor's face when I told him I would buy the potatoes that were going bad. The pulses used were hard as nails because I hadn't steamed them properly. There were date pits in the dish, as I had left the pits in there on purpose, and the gulab jamun were hard as rocks. That's because I had left them in hot oil for way longer than is recommended. I let her go on about how I was good for nothing and how I could never do anything right. How the other ladies were so displeased with her and had left early before making a few snide remarks about how they needed to go get some real food. Her husband's boss's wife had been particularly acidic. I don't remember exactly what she had said to her, but it was enough to crush my aunt. After she was done, I made the most innocent face and asked her why she was upset with me over food that she had cooked. Surely it must have been her cooking, as she was the one hosting the event. My stepbrother couldn't hold in his snicker, and Aunt left in a huff after Dad told her she had no right to yell at me after making me take on a humongous task that she was supposed to perform. Later that day, my dad told me he knew I had done all of this on purpose, and though he understood why, he couldn't condone my actions. As I was to maintain the good girl facade, I nodded in agreement. Aunt had to quit the club in less than 2 weeks, as the other members just would not lay off the snark and catty comments about the disastrous meal she had cooked. Icing on the cake, she couldn't even defend herself, as in order to do so, she would have to admit to being a lying liar who lies. Alright, this next post is titled, Science Teacher Has a Swear Jar. I took a biology class my sophomore year in high school, and my teacher was pretty cool. She was laid back, funny, and didn't have your typical teacher vibe. She had set up a curse jar in the room, and the funds were used to pay for supplies. 25 cents if you swore, but $1 if you dropped an F-bomb. One day, we were doing some group work on tables, the ones with the Bunsen burner and the sink in the middle. Behind me was a kid that was particularly annoying and pretty talkative. Patrick was probably the type of kid who later went on to cure cancer or create Minecraft. Smart kid, but he was basically a 17-year-old Martin from The Simpsons. Anywho, we're all trying to do our work, and Patrick is getting on my nerves. He keeps making loud, bad jokes and poking his head in on the project, telling us that we were doing it wrong. I asked him twice to just worry about his own table, but the third time, I lost it. I walked up to the front of the class, pulled out my wallet, grabbed $1 and put it on the teacher's desk, turned around and said quite loudly, "Patrick, shut the F up." I walked back to my table and sat down. The entire class was silent and was staring at me, and then the teacher. She looked down at the dollar bill on her desk and started laughing out loud. The rest of the class joined in, and Patrick shrunk into his seat. The teacher then said, "Well, he paid his $1. And that's the story of how I told a kid to shut the F up in class without getting in trouble. Alright, I hope you guys are enjoying these stories so far. Before we get into the next few stories, if you guys could please do me a huge favor and smash that like button down below and make sure to subscribe so you never miss any future content. This next post is titled, "If you need to pee more than twice a day, you need a doctor's note." Okay, sure. Cleaning out my home office today and stumbled across paperwork I had saved for whatever reason from a crappy call center job I worked at 15 years ago. This was an outbound sales thing, and it was non-stop calls all day. Needless to say, the job sucked. With the constant talking though, your voice would start cracking throughout the day if you didn't hydrate. So I would bring jugs of water to sip on all day long. This of course meant frequent trips to the restroom. I never abused these trips, and they were always 3 minutes or less. But of course, this wasn't good enough for management. Oh no. One day, my manager demanded I get a doctor's note if I wanted to pee at any time other than one of my 2 regularly scheduled breaks. I could tell she was convinced I would not do it. I scheduled the appointment, filled the doctor in, who thought it was hilarious that this manager either 1, didn't understand biology, or 2, was on a huge power trip. He provided me with the most condescending doctor's note ever. I've got the image of the doctor's note right here, and it is pure gold. The doctor's note says, "To whom it may concern, this letter concerns my patient OP requires a lot of fluid intake while talking on the phone in order to avoid drying out and becoming hoarse. When he drinks this much fluid, he must urinate every 60 to 90 minutes. Please excuse these brief visits to the bathroom as they are unavoidable. Sincerely, the doctor." Needless to say, she was not happy. My coworkers, though, all made trips to the same doctor and got similar notes. Pretty sure I wore a crap-eating grin every time I walked to the bathroom after that. Alright, this next post is titled, "Told me to learn Spanish, so I did." Hello again, big fan of this thread. Hope you enjoy. So this takes place at the McDonald's I worked at, where my soda story comes from. When I started working there, I had barely any knowledge of Spanish outside what I could speak in high school. Even then, it was not really enough in my opinion at the time to really say I could speak it. A strong majority of my coworkers, especially my grill team, spoke it exclusively. They knew enough English to say a few things, and this is where our story really begins. One day, I was taking an order in drive-thru when a Spanish speaker started asking for someone to take their order. I did my best, but turned to the grill team leader for assistance. For this story, we'll call him Jose. Jose was great at his job, but a butthole. You know that old saying that gets thrown around by uptight conservatives, something like, Here in America, we speak English. Well, that's definitely not Jose. The day I asked for his help, he glared daggers at me and said very curtly, "Hey, fat white boy, you need to speak Spanish. We speak Spanish here, and if you don't like it, you can leave." I had another Spanish-speaking manager take the order, and a bilingual friend of mine later told me what he said. I was pretty upset. Well, I could have taken the stance of speak English, you're in the United States, but if I said anything like that, I would have been rebuked by my coworkers and probably lost a few friends. Instead, I decided to maliciously comply. I started to memorize every topping they would call out to one another, and in my head pair it with its English counterpart. I listened to my bilingual managers greet and communicate with the customers, and in a couple weeks, I had it all figured out. No lessons, no computer programs, just simply by paying attention to everything they said. It was about 2 weeks after the incident. A Spanish-speaking customer came through the drive-thru. I turned to Jose and said, "Listen to this." I took the whole order, greeted and concluded the conversation 100% Spanish. I turned towards him and repeated the special order to him in perfect Spanish. He looked like I just mooned him. He was shocked. His jaw gaped, and he stammered a second before saying, "Nah, F that, learn French," and proceeded to start talking to his grill team in French. My store manager had heard enough and called him out in Spanish, telling him what he's doing is just BS and rude. She told him that she'd been in the country half the time he had, and she learned English and that he should too. He told her to shove it and quit on the spot, saying no one will ever force him to speak English for a job and that he didn't need us. My manager congratulated me on taking the initiative to learn a very important skill in the job. My family, which once were based out of San Diego and were pretty fluent Spanish speakers, were also elated to hear that I'd picked up on the language so fast. TLDR, grill team manager at my fast food restaurant refused to learn English and demanded I learn Spanish if I wanted to keep working there. I studied my bilingual coworkers and learned Spanish in 2 weeks, which pissed him off. Alright, that's going to conclude today's malicious compliance video. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Definitely go ahead and check out the other pro revenge and malicious compliance videos on this channel. And if you could, do me a favor and smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss any future videos, and have a great rest of your day.